Hello, and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. So I am here today with my friend Travis McKenzie. Travis is actually the third person I'm going to have on the show who had to relearn how to walk. And I will tell you, Trav, the fourth will be Marco Shateto, who I'm having in a couple weeks on the anniversary of getting his feet amputated. So
yeah.
This is kind of crazy, but maybe I have a theme that I talk to people who have, seen the darkest of times and come back from it. So Travis, I want to talk about your story today, but let me just give a quick introduction to you.
Okay.
You are a dad, which I love. Your Instagram feed is so much fun with your two little kids. You're a husband. You are a founder of Inner Voice Media Group. Your goal is to be a lifelong endurance athlete, which I love. Let's Tom Brady the shit out of this because I want to do the same thing. You have spent what you call an abnormally long time coming to terms with what it means to be a lifelong athlete, and I want to get into that today. But I think part of that is because your superpower is curiosity, and through both your work and your family life, you seem to foster this as part of your skill set on a daily basis. You work with brands, you work with athletes, you work with events to bring really unique stories to life. Your recent work is creating a podcast for 29029 Everesting, which we can talk about today, and helping to raise more than $1.2 million for Patrick Dempsey's Dempsey Center Cancer Support organization. You're also building an incredible world's best athlete ambassador program for sports tech startup Supersapiens. And so you are somebody who is a storyteller, you are an endurance junkie, you are a dot connector, you are somebody who's like, if you want to know someone in the sports endurance world, call me, I'm your guy. So I'm going to start off and I want to ask you, who are the endurance athletes that you look up to?
Wow, what a great intro. You're a star. I'm so glad and happy to be here. And I want to go back to your first question around learning to walk again at some point, because I think I have some theories on that. But I really look up to anyone who's consistent. So my sporting background is, when I was growing up, my dad was a triathlete in Australia in the early 90s, before anyone really knew what triathlon was. And I used to follow him around as a family to regional races all around the country. So I got an early glimpse into what it was like to be an endurance athlete. And it was kind of normal for me to grow up around that. But then I pursued a life of as an Australian rules footballer. So in Australia, Aussie rules football is basically the biggest sport. It's the football equivalent of what you would have here in the US. And that was what I pursued for the longest time. I went through the process of trying to go and make it as a professional athlete. And really, honestly, the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a professional athlete. That was like the biggest goal and dream that I ever had, which lends itself to that, spending an abnormal amount of time wondering how I can continue to be an athlete. But people I look up to was the question. People who I look up to are consistent. People who are have great results on the biggest stage time and time again. So I think that also lends itself to how you show up in life, how you're successful in business, how you're successful as a husband and a father and a parent and a friend, is consistency. So yeah, that's who I look up to the most.
And is that what you saw from your dad? I mean, your dad wasn't he wasn't, like a young, professional star, but he was winning his age group. He was podiuming. Is that even a word? He was podiuming.
It is now, yeah.
It is now in the event. So you're a kid, you're like 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, and you're watching him. And was the consistency what you saw, or did you just see the results? Like, did you get it that early?
Yeah, I think I saw a few things. I kind of saw him as a superhero. He was this big, strong, amazing man who pursued a life of sport. And, he was still working, as you said, married to my mom, and we had a great family life. But he was just this superhero, and his pursuit of goals, I think, is what really resonated with me. I didn't know it at the time. But that's what I looked up to, the consistency of showing up every day, whether it's dark, cold, wet, windy, raining, whatever, fitting it around work, fitting around family schedule. Nothing was kind of left off the table. It was that consistency of showing up and pursuing your goals. It was cool that he would win. Like, he would get these prizes, and, as kids, we would get all these T-shirts and we'd get all these things that he would get. So that was cool to see. But I also, I think it just really resonated with me, that the pursuit of something beyond yourself. You have to show up and do the work, I think was really what stood out to me as a kid, and what I try and do for myself as well for my kids.
Did you see him fail?
Yeah, of course. There was races where he didn't achieve the results he wanted. There's actually one, this is great. I love going back this far. So one thing that I really remember was there was a race where he was super fit and he was ready. He was doing Ironman in Australia, and he had like 3 or 4 punctures, so like flat tires on the race. And usually you would carry enough supplies to kind of get yourself through maybe 1 or 2 of those, so you can fix them yourself and keep going. But as soon as you go past 2, no one's carrying what they need to fix those. So you're waiting for on-road support to come and help you and get you on your way. So I think from memory, he lost about an hour just waiting on the side of the road for the bike, the mechanic to come along. And what I saw in that was that he didn't achieve the result he wanted, but he never quit. He didn't stop and sulk and say, well, today's not my day. He kept on going. He finished the bike ride. He finished the run. And to me, that, signaled that no matter what comes your way, you just keep moving forward, and you're not going to have the perfect day. It may never come. But if you can't make the most of the opportunity and the day you have, then you may as well not show up.
Yeah, I asked that question because I think a lot of athletes have this problem where either their role models, they never saw their role models fail because you don't see the work in the dark, in the cold and the hard times. You don't see the recovery, the rehab. You just see what's on TV, right? You just see the stage. And I think it becomes very difficult when you then try to become an athlete yourself and things are hard, right? There are dark, ugly, cold mornings where things just don't work out. And to be able to see that from him and to have him role model, not just the consistency and the pursuit of excellence, but not quitting. I mean, it's not like he was like halfway through a 5K and it's like, whatever, I can just do another 1.5 miles. Like, partway through the bike on a, you still have a lot of bike riding and then a marathon to run.
Still a long day. Do you know what's interesting you say that? So there's a couple of things. So triathlon in particular and Ironman, which is what I kind of grew up loving and idolizing, as I've already mentioned, it has a storyline within it that shows struggles. So from the very first ABC production showing the Ironman on TV in 1983 was when Julie Moss was crawling across the finish line, and she got past 20 meters from the finish. She was in first place. She crawled across the line, put her hand across the line, and someone had passed her in the finish chute. That was the very first introduction into the world of what Ironman was. So there's been this storyline of struggle that has dominated that production right from the start. So I think that people can see in that sport that, like, you never give up. There's an unwritten rule that no matter what happens, you always finish. And that's been fostered through 1 or 2 generations. It's still an early sport. 40 years is how long it's been around. So it's been fostered through, let's call it 2 or 3 generations, that you'd never give up and you never quit. And I saw that firsthand with my dad, but you see it on every NBC Ironman show that comes. There's these stories of struggle. So that's one thing. The second thing is, as a kid, I supported the Geelong football team, the Geelong Cats in the AFL, and they lost 4 grand finals in 7 years. So 4 championships in 7 years, and I'm a kid as a supporter. So my team has never won a championship. The team that I follow has never, ever won a championship. So seeing that as a kid and seeing that, okay, you can keep showing up every year. And none of this stuff I've never thought about this stuff until right now. So thank you for unlocking this in me. But I think those are 2 things that really stand out for me of, it's okay to overcome struggle. It's actually probably better, because no one really loves a winner who doesn't go through any form of struggle. I call it the war story. You don't come back and talk about the race where everything went perfectly. You talk about all the times in the event and the race where things went wrong and you overcame those challenges. And I think it just makes for a better story, but it's also a better lesson.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Our mutual friend Jesse Itzler posted something on Instagram the other day where he had just decided to do this triathlon out of nowhere, right? He hadn't trained, he hadn't done any of the stuff, and I mean, he's a relatively fit guy, but he had a photo of himself at the end where he was just like baked, totally cooked, totally done, and he had a caption was something like, nobody ever remembers the easy days. And I thought, that's really true. Like whenever I get together with any of my friends, whenever we do anything in sport, we don't talk about the remember that time when everything went perfectly? We talk about the total shit shows where everything fell apart and how you pulled yourself together and how you came through. And those really are those stories have arc to them. Those stories have great arc. But your story arc includes getting hit by a car and having to have your spine fused back together right when you were like at the height of your triathlete time.
Yeah.
So that's quite an arc that not a lot of us have.
Yeah.
Take us back to 2015.
Yeah. So 2015, March 7th, 2015, I rolled out of my apartment in Vancouver on a usual Saturday long ride. So this day was riding up almost to Whistler and back. So if you've been to Vancouver, there's a Sea to Sky highway. It goes up to Whistler. It's one of the most beautiful drives and rides you could imagine. So usual Saturday, we do a loop and then come back. I dropped off 2 of my friends at their homes. They were done for the day, and I was going to go out and continue for about another hour. Same route we go every week. Basically, I kept going, turned a corner, and then all of a sudden there's a car coming directly at me. And I had nowhere to go. I didn't have a moment to think about it. I was hit on my left leg. I took the brunt on my left leg, dislocated that hip. Was thrown over the handlebars, landed on my head and neck, fractured my bunch of ribs, scapula, and at the time didn't know that I'd also fractured my vertebrae in my neck. So it was a moment in time where it happened so fast, couldn't think about it, but it was definitely life-changing for me. It was a moment in time where, my whole kind of life was literally thrown upside down.
And you... I went back, I did a deep dive on your Instagram, and right around the time where you have like the x-ray of all the things in your spine that are holding your neck up, and you in the wheelchair. And I love the picture of you like leaving the hospital, like throwing up your middle finger at the wheelchair, like screw you. There's also a photo of you on the cover of Triathlete magazine. Like, I mean, you were really, and you had just started dating the woman that would become your wife just a couple months earlier. So when you talk about what you have to do in those dark moments, right? The self-talk to keep yourself going, to bring yourself back. Did you know at the time that you were like, I'm going to recover. They're going to do surgery. It'll be fine. I'll get back on the bike. I'm going to be totally cool. Or were you like, now what?
It's interesting. There was never a moment where I thought that I wouldn't be able to come back. I think I was so stubborn and so in that athlete mindset that this is just another hurdle to overcome. I didn't understand at the time the complexity of what that meant, or how difficult it would be, or the deep, dark moments you would have to go through to get back to any level of sport. But I started with the mindset of, okay, like let's get to work. As soon as the surgeries were done, let's get to work on how we can get rehabbed, how we can start walking again. How do I build up my strength again to be able to race? And I remember laying in my hospital bed, and I watched Ironman Melbourne happen. So 1 year prior, I had the race of my career in Ironman Melbourne, and I watched that race happen, and I was like, I'm going to race there again next year. So that was like, I remember that moment laying in hospital, watching that race unfold. And a friend of mine at the time, Jeffrey Simons, well, he's still a friend, but he won the race. So I kind of looked at that. I'm like, yes, that's where I want to be next year. So I just had it in my mind that that's the only thing I needed to do, was just to get ready for that race next year.
And did the doctors agree with you? Or they were like, yeah, sure, no problem. Just this is the path. This is what you should do. We're there with you. Or did they think you were crazy?
Absolutely crazy. They thought I was absolutely crazy. They thought no chance. And here's the thing. So I was in a spinal ward in Vancouver General Hospital, and it was usually for people who were older. So they would have, fusion surgeries if they're degenerative diseases in their bones and things like that, or people who were totally paralyzed. So they there's no opportunity for them to walk again. So I was in this position where I had this athlete mindset. The rest of the ward is either given up in one regard or the other. And so when I was able to, I was asking for additional physio sessions. We would get a lot at a time, every day. And I was like, let's have more. During my time in hospital, I was the guy out in the hallway holding onto the rail, doing one-legged squats with my good leg, because the hip that was dislocated was completely immobilized. So I was doing like one-legged squats out of my chair, and like just doing additional. So they absolutely thought I was crazy. There was like, who's this guy? Let's get him out of here. He's like ruining the vibe for everyone.
You're supposed to be docile. You were supposed to have given up. You're
Totally
ruining our vibe.
Yeah, killing the vibe in here.
But I got to ask, so Lauren, the woman who's going to become your wife, you just started dating her.
Yeah.
Were you like, you can go, just leave me? Just leave me? Or did you know she was the one before that? Did you already know?
I did. I already knew. And it was this kind of weird set of circumstances. So Lauren moved from Maine to Vancouver to take a job at Lululemon in November of 2014. And I was going through this like crisis of personality. I was dating someone at the time. I just finished Ironman Kona, didn't have the result I wanted to have. And I was just going through all of this stuff. Laura and I met on the first week of her starting her job. She had seen.
You were also there. You were the global brands or global events ambassador.
Yeah, global events manager at Lululemon. And I was also like, I'd written a bunch of blogs for Lululemon about triathlon and training and pursuing your goals. And so she was a beginner triathlete. So she researched me basically and reached out to me and said, hey, I'm coming to town. I'd love to know like the best places to swim. Where can I go run? What's the best bike shop? So she had all these questions, and it was not uncommon for people to reach out to me with questions about Vancouver or triathlon or what have you. So I said, yeah, sure. Like, here's the best coffee shop. It's like a block from the office. I'll meet you there. Let's have a coffee. And I walk in there. She's already sitting there. She's always early. I was like maybe a few minutes late, which is traditionally my style. And I was like, she took my breath away. I was like, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my entire life. Holy crap. And so we sit down, we have a coffee, and I'm like, we were just having a conversation, but I'm like, I have to tell her that I'm dating someone. Like, for some reason I had to tell her. So I started telling, I'm like, I live up the street. I live with my girlfriend right now. And after we compared notes, she was like, she had the same feeling about me. And she was like, it like broke her heart that I told her I had a girlfriend. She's like, oh, okay, like no problems, whatever. So we kind of kept our distance after that, because I'm like, I can't see her, she can't see me, because otherwise it's just going to like blow up in our faces. So it took a couple of months, and finally I, ended it with my girlfriend at the time. And then it was like time for us to pursue whatever was there. So our first date was on December 31st, New Year's Eve. I went over to her place
no pressure.
No pressure, pizza and champagne. That was our first date. And then, so we started dating officially then, basically. And my accident happened in March. So long story short, we had this really passionate relationship right from the beginning. And then when I had my accident, so I already knew, to answer your question, I already knew she was the one. And then the fact that she did not leave my side, she would go to work, she would come back every night, and she would go home and stay at her apartment. But she was there every day, and she didn't have to be. Like, we had just started dating. It was all brand new and fresh. And she just showed up for me in my moment of struggle, like a partner would. And so then I ended up looking at engagement rings in my hospital bed. I was like convinced and sure. And then to kind of full circle or finish up that story. So that was in March. We went back to visit her family in Maine on July 4th weekend. I proposed on July 3rd of that year. And then we were married on September 26th of that year. So from dating to marriage within 9 months. And it was like, if you know, you know. And I think the accident obviously like sped things up, because it just provided a whole nother layer of clarity in what I wanted in my life. And she was a part of that.
So I never believed that when you know, until I met the man I was going to marry. And then I was like, I had been dating somebody for years and just was always like, well, I'm happy. I guess this is what happy is. And then, it just didn't work. We broke up, and I start dating the man I end up marrying. And I had, at that point, I didn't want to get married. I didn't want to have kids. I didn't want any of it. And there was one day where we were literally like playing hide and seek with some kid who was the child of a family that was coming to look at the house where he happened to be living rent free with his former college roommate. And we're outside in the backyard. We're playing hide and seek. And of course, the kid finds me immediately because I think kids are dumb. And I just stand in the middle of the field, like assuming like that's how you play hide and seek because she's 6. Like she's stupid. Like how's she going to find me?
Yeah.
Right. Little do I know. And then we're looking for him and looking for him and looking for him. And finally I hear from like up in the sky, like, Nadia, hello, Nadia. And I look up and he's like climbed a tree and he's doing hide and seek. He's in a tree. And like a bolt of lightning, I heard my grandmother say from who knows where, you're going to have his children one day. And it was just like, boom, like
Wow.
he was the one. We've been dating for like 6 weeks. And I just knew it was crazy. But I think you don't know until you know. But that is a leap of faith that you take, right? It's just a huge leap of faith. So 9 months, you from dating, I mean, you know, even less than, it sounds like less than a year, even from meeting. So, okay. So you're in the hospital bed, you decide you're going to, you decide that you're going to not just walk, you're going to compete again. You meet the woman of your dreams, you decide she's the one, you marry her, and you're also an entrepreneur. So there's this theme that goes through here that you like leaps of faith. It seems.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the entrepreneurship journey that you've had, like going from, you know, doing sport, going into Lululemon, and then going off on your own. It's kind of a scary thing to do.
Yeah. It's funny. It's interesting you describe it that, because anything important in my life that people look at as scary hasn't been that scary. It's like this calculated risk that you take. And for me, I think it's like, so here, let me put some color on this. I had my dream job at Lululemon. It was everything that I had worked for in a career. I was managing what was rated the world's best half marathon. I was the race director for that event. It was the Seawees Half Marathon in Vancouver. 10,000 people, 15,000 person concert afterwards in beautiful Vancouver in the summer. It was the greatest event. I was also managing our sponsorships for BMC Professional Cycling Team, the BMC Professional Triathlon Team, the specialized Lululemon Women's Cycling Team. I was traveling to Europe to attend their training camps. I was riding and training and competing with these athletes and building friendships and networks with these athletes. It was everything that I would want in a career. Then I have my accident. Then I decide I want to get married to the woman of my dreams. Then I decide I want to take on this entrepreneurial journey because there was more that I wanted to do. So it sounds really crazy actually now as I describe it, but I decided to leave Lululemon with a couple of consulting opportunities to start with and figure it out, build the plane as we fly, because I wanted to have the freedom and the autonomy to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it and create something magical for the world, but also pursue my dream of getting back and competing as an athlete. So there was all of these things in there. So I took the leap and I decided that I was going to pursue a life of entrepreneurship and help build and tell stories about brands, athletes, and events and help them show up effectively and efficiently and impactfully within the endurance sports world. And it started with one client. I'm now working with a number of amazing clients, and I get to do work that I'm really proud of and that I really love, and I get to create things that I really love and that I'm proud of. And it hasn't been easy, but I wouldn't have had it any other way.
You know, when I left my big firm, my marquee, my, Lululemon type job, I had a lot of people that were like, how long did it take you to write your business plan?
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't have a business plan. I had no plan. I just had some business, right? There were a couple consulting opportunities and it's that moment when you're like, well, it's now or never.
Yeah.
And there has to be this belief that good work begets more good work. Like if you do good work, the people for whom you do good work will tell other people that they hang out with, and then they'll want you to do work. Like your work should sell itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that there's been some stinkers. Like I've done some awful work. I've done some great work, but it's all about, what I've learned over the last 4.5 years, I guess, is that you need to find better clients. So you need to find better clients. You need to do good work for those clients. Sometimes in the beginning, and this will, people will relate to this, you take stuff that you didn't want to take, but you needed the money or you needed the opportunity or you needed the network or what have you. And over time, you start to really go from this really wide funnel of things that you want to do to like, I'm really laser focused on the work and the clients that I want to work with now. But it comes through trial and error, and man, there was some stinkers for sure.
Yeah, that is such a good lesson. I think, in my early days, I would do anything. Like if you would pay me an hourly rate and it was somewhere within the world of executive search, I would do it.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is that all the time that I was spending making $45 an hour or $60 an hour doing reference checks for some, random search firm who wanted me to do it, I wasn't actually lining myself up to do the $100 work hour,
Yeah.
the $200 work hour. And I was actually losing money when I was making money in the early days because I wasn't setting myself up. And I came to understand that there were two numbers, right? There was the need to make number and the want to make number. And I was doing the work to try to get myself to the want to make number, but that number wasn't ever going up. So I had to figure out what the need to make number was. And it's like, okay, what's like minimal viable number I need to make? And then the rest of the time I spend doing work for free, maybe for the kinds of clients that I want. But that took me years to figure that out. You're only 4.5 years in. I think I was still figuring it out at 4.5 years.
And I definitely don't have it all figured out at all. Like I think there's a balance now between like taking on more and and then the quality of work goes down because you're not able to put the time in your chair to actually do it. And then COVID comes along and you've got 2 kids running around and you've got a wife who works and is ambitious in her career. So it's never, I don't think you will ever solve it. It's just how can you just get better at making better decisions? And one thing I learned very early on was the term opportunity cost. So it's okay to sit in your chair and do this $45 an hour work, but every hour that you're doing that work is an hour that you can't be spending going and having coffee with someone or working on finding what that $100 an hour opportunity might be or more. So thinking about where and how you are spending your time. And we're still mercenaries in effect. Like I'm still trading my services and my time for money. So it's one of those things where I've yet to create something that's scalable and sustainable that doesn't require my input because it's all work that I'm doing that people are paying for. And that's okay because I like to have the control of the output. But I think that's the next level or the next step up is what can you create or what can we create or what can you create watching that doesn't require multiple hours of input from you and can be scalable and sustainable. And that's where we're shooting for. That's where that's what we're working on here.
Yeah, that's such a challenge. That's such a challenge getting out of that, the sort of hourly rate work and getting more to sort of project and scalable work.
Yeah.
And I think especially for people who are in the creative space, how do you pull yourself out of that? I have a friend who likes to talk about $10 work, $100 work, $1,000 work, and $10,000 work. And I end up, I think a lot of days because I'm just exhausted, right? I mean, like I'm doing this, I'm having this great long form, deep conversation with you, which nobody else on my team would be able to do. But I also had to set up the lighting and the camera and the, StreamYard that we're using and my, little sound booth of moving blankets that you'd be so proud of. And as a guy a podcaster and, but so I'm stuck, even though I'm doing the $10,000 work, I'm also still stuck doing the $10 work.
Yeah.
And I think during COVID, because we have to do a lot of that stuff ourselves and we're also exhausted, I think a lot of us tend to get in that trap of like, well, it feels good. I could just, check off like working on, I don't know, organizing systems that somebody else could do for me, but you get stuck in it because it's almost like it's like emotional, it's fulfilling. Like I've done it. Like you have small kids and when I had kids that were, a baby and a few years old, like yours are right now, I used to love to do the dishes. And I talk about this a lot. And it's not because I like to do the dishes. It was just that it was the only thing of my life that had a beginning, middle, and an end. And I was like, check, done. As opposed to like the laundry's never going to be done. The kitchen's never going to be clean. Like all these things, like it goes on and on.
Yeah.
So I think we get trapped in the sort of this $10, the small work. How do you pull yourself out of that trap?
Yeah. 2 things come up for me there that I still want to do the $10 work for a time so that I know what I'm looking for when I'm hiring the person to do the $10 work for me.
Smart.
So like knowing what you're asking people to do, because there's so much ambiguity when you say, well, put the curtains up and turn the light on and log into StreamYard. There's 1,000 ways that could happen. But unless you can be clear on what that is, then that to me is important work to understand so then you can hire into someone for that. And I also think that as human beings, we are programmed to check boxes. So there is this, I did that today, tick, or like you get into your, so I'll give you an example. So for me to create a story, a 29 story, which I did with you, takes hours. It takes me hours of sitting in a chair and writing and editing and bringing photos together and publishing and doing edits and drafts and all of this stuff. It takes hours of work. But instead of sitting down in my chair for 2 or 3 or 5 hours, I'll go in and spend 5 hours replying to dumb emails or unsubscribing to shit that I don't remember signing up for.
Yeah.
Because I'll check a box, because now my inbox is at 0. But if I let my inbox go to 1,000 and I do that work, which is better off in the long term? Or like, what's getting me closer to my goals? But every single night, what am I doing? Right, checking boxes and going through these dumb emails. So I think it becomes this, it's procrastination at the end of the day. I'm procrastinating from pursuing my goals. And this isn't all the time. Like, this is sometimes, because otherwise I wouldn't have a job or I wouldn't have clients. But it's something that we have to get clear on as creatives and as people who are doing big work in the world. How do we spend more time doing the big work and less time doing the small work and the stuff that's not important? So I'm yet to answer it, but I think that's a $1 million question we all need to answer for ourselves.
I think about this a lot. Like, I wonder where procrastination comes from. And I think sometimes it comes from just emotional exhaustion, right? Like, you're just tired. Sometimes I look at my like, for example, I'm working on my email funnel right now, and in order to have, like, people go and they take a quiz, to figure out where they are in their limitless journey. And then they get put in a funnel, and they get put in a funnel based on one of the things that's holding them back from being limitless. But if you sign up for A, but then you hop over to B, then you're in the B funnel. But then if sometimes you're like, oh wait, but I actually want to do this other thing and take the course, then you're in the course funnel. And I look at it and it makes my head hurt. And I'm not a dumb person, but it makes my head hurt. So I procrastinate and I do the easy thing, right? Like, I just do the equivalent to the emotional eating, right? Like, I get the candy instead of the vegetables. Sometimes I think it comes from fear, though, also. Like, we 100%. Procrastinate because we're like afraid of, like, well, what if I do it and I put it out there and it fails? Like, it's not perfect enough.
I couldn't have said it better. Here's what it is for me. Every time I press publish on a piece of work, a story, a podcast, a video, or an email funnel, whatever it is, every time you ship your work out into the world, it's now open to judgment of others. No one cares about your email funnel and whether it works or not. Right. But you do, and there is that fear holding you back to push and ship your work. And that's something that I go through every single day, because I'll find the next thing to do that doesn't involve me sitting in my chair and creating something that can be judged by others. Yeah. I know it, and I recognize it in myself. And I'm sure when I say those words, people will also recognize them in themselves, because it's a real thing. Everyone goes through it. No one is immune from the fear of critique of other people. I don't care what you say.
Yeah,
no one is.
We think that procrastination is perfectionism, but it's fear.
It's fear.
It's fear. It's absolutely fear. So, but storytelling, I hear this about, like, the pressing publish, because, for me, it used to, I spent 20 years in executive search, and I was telling people stories to clients, but, it was within the confines of a boardroom, like, nobody saw it. And then I spent the last 5 years telling my own stories. And now, as I'm launching to this podcast, I feel this sort of overwhelming burden in telling other people's stories. Like, I got to get your story right, because if I don't, that's not fair to you, right? Like, it's not just about, like, can I get the bit right on stage? Can I tell the funny joke? Can I get the callback timing, perfected? Telling someone else's story, I think it's hard. Like, I think sometimes about actresses and actors who play people who, they portray people who are dead, right? Like, you portray Queen Victoria, nothing's going to go wrong. But if you portray Queen Elizabeth, she's alive. Like, there's a lot of pressure to tell someone's story.
Yeah, it is. That's a really interesting example. I've read quite a bit recently around, these characterizations of characters in movies, like even the Titanic. There's a scene in the Titanic where there's a guy, and I haven't watched it for years, but I read this recently about he shoots himself. He commits suicide. He's like a captain on the ship. And his family is saying that didn't happen. There's no record of that ever happening. There's no reason for you to do that other than the artistic telling of this story. So that's like an example of something different from what you mentioned. But having that, to play someone else who's still living, that would be completely weird to me. But then your point around telling someone else's story, I have the privilege of bringing stories to life either through Inner Voice, which was a platform that I created that tells the stories of endurance athletes, beyond the here's what I eat, here's how I train, here's the sponsors I want to thank. It's like a human story. It's a human side of their story. And then the same so good. And then the same with 29 to 29. So I had the privilege of telling your story, and we worked through that together. And I'm taking what you told me, I'm interpreting it, I'm writing it in, your words, adding some context and trying to, portray that. That goes back to you for your edits of context and things like that. But it is something that's difficult. And I also think that it's actually easier than what you did in telling your own story, because I have it's your story to kind of be arm's length. I'm helping facilitate that story. But at the end of the day, this is your story. But when you're writing and telling your own story, that would be so hard because it is totally open to that critique and judgment of others. So kudos to you and hats off for you for being able to bring that to life and put your work out into the world. And I think I couldn't think of anything harder than publishing a book. Honestly, we're doing this and this is great. And we're doing podcasts and it's an hour and, then there's another episode in a couple of days and again and again. But your story lives on in perpetuity in written form for anyone to interpret however they want to interpret.
To be fair, if I thought that Limitless was going to be as successful as it was, I probably would have perseverated over my story a little bit more. I would have been like, I don't know, I'm not sure. But literally, I thought 3 people would buy it. Me, my mother, my father, and maybe probably one of those would have been a used copy. So honestly, I sort of did it. It was the same thing as launching a business. You sort of put it out there in the world, and you're like, all right, I'm going to building the plane as I'm flying it. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm just going to say yes to every opportunity and figure it out later. Right. Yep. You just don't know. But I think this goes back to the endurance athlete thing. I came to athleticism very late in my life. I ran my first mile ever when I turned 39. And when I was 41 and I'm running down the Boston Marathon course, by the way, for any athletes listening, I was a charity runner. I'm very slow. So this is not just me like I ran, qualified for Boston. I did not. I never will. But it was 92 degrees on that day. That was Marathon Monday. And I remember getting to Kenmore Square, I remember getting to 6 miles out. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I've run 20 miles. I have 6.2 left because the 0.2 is the part that really kicks you in the ass. It's the 0.2. And I remember thinking, I don't know what happens now. Like 20 miles is the farthest that we've ever run in training. Like I've done it. I've gone through all the cities, all the towns where I've crested Heartbreak Hill. Like awesome. Now what? And there was a voice inside my head that said, this is the greatest thing you've ever done. You're going to be a marathoner, right? Run, walk, crawl, cartwheel, you're going to be a marathoner. And then there's another voice inside your head that's like, what are you, fucking crazy? You're going to die out here. Like it's 92 degrees and your shoes are like, you're going to die. And only one of those voices gets to win. But, you're at this place where you're just like, leap of faith. I don't know what happens next. I'm going to figure it out. And I might like shit my pants. I might pass out. Like you just don't know. And I think, do you think as you look at because you've launched so many businesses, you have been on this entrepreneurship journey for so long. Do you think that not just the training as an athlete, but even just watching your dad back in the early days helped formulate something inside of you, your own inner voice that helped talk you into continuing to say yes, to have that optimism?
Yeah. I love your story. I love that story around, because everyone faces it at that moment, 20 miles into a marathon or however long into an Ironman, everyone faces that. And I think that that's a microcosm for life, quite honestly. Like whenever you find yourself butting up against something that's difficult, whether it's a relationship with your loved one, whether it's with your family, whether it's in the business life, there's going to be moments where it's tough and there's friction there. And you're going to have these voices these conflicting voices of pull away or keep moving forward. And I think your question around, do you think endurance sports has helped me on my entrepreneurial journey? I think so. I think the fact that I know how to work hard, I know that nothing is guaranteed. I know that if you just keep going until you get around the next bend, then something might change. You might be feeling bad now, but at mile 21, you actually might feel amazing. And I think one thing that's been really resonated with me lately is really controlling the controllables, especially during COVID and I think that's what I learned a lot from endurance sports is you can't control things like the weather. You can't control things like whoever else is in the race. You can't control to a certain extent, what your equipment is going to do. You can service it and have it ready and in the best position. But if you run over a tag, you're going to get a flat tire. So it's really what can you control? And the three things that I always think about is I can breathe, I can control my breathing. I can take a deep breath when I need to take a deep breath. I can control my attitude, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Whenever anything comes up in life, you can control your attitude and how you approach those things. And you can control your technique. So in a sporting sense, that's easy to recognize, where you're landing on your foot when you're striding through, on the bike, what you're pushing and pulling, swimming, same thing. So I can control my technique in that instance. That's a little bit harder and a little bit more of a stretch when you're in life and you're having an argument or a disagreement with your wife or your client and you aren't getting along or understanding the whatever it is. But those three things, breathing, attitude, and technique, control those and you can pretty much guarantee that things are going to be okay in the end if you just keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are very reactionary with our family members, with our clients, and especially now, it's for people who are listening later, we're a week out from the 2020 election. So I think there's a lot of tensions are high, right? Yeah. Regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, I think people are quite reactionary, and people don't hear what you say; they hear what they think you say, right? They hear what, and so just controlling your reactions to that, I think, is so huge. I had a business partner when I was in search who had a PhD in psychology. She taught me a very good trick, which I was always afraid to use, and until I watched her do it. And she would watch a client or a staff member just behaving badly, and she would just say, "Let me just stop you right there and let's just remind ourselves of what we want to accomplish in this conversation." And she would just sort of stop it. It was just okay. It was almost like taking a walking break, at the water station. She was like, "Let's just stop and remind ourselves why we're doing this." And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's good." And I think about her a lot when I'm in those dark moments. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to feel good at mile 21, but we'll see. So one of the other things that you can control is your fuel. And I know that you are working on, it's my genius segue here to Supersapiens.
I love that. I love it.
I know that you and I, we've talked before about Whoops and other wearables and things that teach you how to, biohack and how to really understand data. I wake up in the morning, this morning I woke up and I was like, it's cold, it's dark. I don't want to get on my rowing machine. I got two teammates coming over because we set up the garage as a, outdoor kind of COVID rowing studio. So I got to go because they're there, but I feel terrible. And then I look at my Whoop. My Whoop's 94% recovered. It's
time to go.
Lies. I guess I gotta go, right? So this whole idea of how we can track data so that we can perform better, I think is fascinating. So tell me about, so Supersapiens works with, it tracks your glucose, so it's your fuel coming in.
Yeah, correct. So I'm gonna go off in a little bit of a soapbox here first. So I grew up in a household that was all about go out and run and compete and have fun and do your thing. And there was no data and no trackables, and everyone just kind of went off feel. So there's this whole segment of our community, being the endurance sports community, that is starting to feel a little bit like that, and they're pushing back against data. They're like, no one understands how their body works anymore. So we're always looking at our Whoop, we're looking at our pace and our heart rate and our power output, and all of these inputs that are coming in is kind of creating someone who doesn't necessarily understand what is happening in their body. And my response to that is, that's great. And you obviously have to practice, and you work on getting to know your body. But I have limited time. I have limited time to train. I have limited time to do my workouts. I still have goals in athletics, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But I want to have as much information as I possibly can to help me perform at my best, because I have so much limited time. And that's the same with executives. That's the same with everyone who's an amateur athlete who has goals in sport, is that you want to make the most of the limited time you have to get better. So that's my counter argument. And that's where Supersapiens comes in. So Supersapiens is a brand new tech startup based in Atlanta, Georgia. We've partnered with Abbott, which is the world's leading diabetes control company. And we're using the Abbott Libre Sense sport glucose biosensor paired with our app, and it monitors your glucose in real time. So what that means is you can see any moment of any day what your glucose levels are at. And why is that important? That's important for things like being able to be fueled correctly for a training session. So you'll know that you have these moments where you either haven't eaten, you've eaten something you shouldn't have, you just don't feel it, and you don't feel your best in a workout. So that's where glucose visibility can help. You'll be able to look at and see what your glucose is doing in any given moment. So that's kind of a training aspect. Then in racing, so thinking about your Boston Marathon experience, you're running along at mile 20, all of a sudden your energy is dropping. You're going to a point where you're just running out of energy, you're slowing down. Perhaps that has something to do with your glucose levels and your fueling. So if you had visibility into that in a race scenario where you can see what your numbers are at any given time, what your trends are at any given time, whether you're trending up, you're trending down, and giving you that ability to fuel in that moment to be able to continue that, wouldn't that be great? That's what we can do. And then the other two pillars that we're working on as well is recovery. So knowing that after a hard workout or a hard race, everyone knows that you need to fuel to get yourself recovered, your muscle repair, things like that, but also to get yourself ready for the next day or the next workout. So knowing what to eat and when to eat and what it does to your glucose levels will help you prepare for that next workout or that next session. And finally, on diet validation, everyone has their diet. Everyone has their, I'm doing keto, I'm doing high carb, I'm doing low carb, I'm doing this, that, and the other. We're doing that based on what other people tell us that we should be doing or other people's experiences.
Yes.
So to be able to have a window into your glucose levels and what your fueling levels do based on what your diet is helps you to validate whatever choice you've made to pursue your diet at that time. So it's these 4 pillars of sport, nutrition, and fueling that we're able to now give you a window into, because previously you weren't able to see what your glucose visibility was. So we launch in Europe coming up here in December. So we've got pre-orders now. We start shipping in Europe, and then the US eventually at some point, hopefully next year. So it's exciting. I love sport. I love high performance. I love nutrition and data. So it's like this really great congruence of all those things. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I think that the advice I always had growing up, and I'm a child of the 70s, so I'm old, was eat less, move more, right? Yep. That still is accurate if people want to lose weight, but it's like eat less maybe, but eat what? And move more, but what kind of movement? I think we've just learned so much since then. I mean, eat less in the 70s and 80s was like have snack wells and tab, right? Like less calories, but like there was so much crap in the food that it wasn't food, it was fake food. So as I'm now like rounding 50 and my metabolism changes and I'm discovering athleticism and I'm like finishing my first decade as a quote unquote athlete, I'm still at the point where like when a coach calls me an athlete, I'm like, oh my god, he's talking to me. I'm an athlete. It's still super fun. But it's hard to think about it. And, there's all kinds of sport. Like, I'm a rower, and it's not really endurance. Like I'm right now, I am the reigning lightweight women's 40 to 49-year-old champion of the indoor 2K, right? So
you are, there you are.
Amazing. But it's an 8-minute or less, hopefully race. So figuring out how to train for that and fuel for that is different than if I'm going to also then run a half marathon or run a marathon or do 29:29 and climb, Mount Stratton 17 times. So what I like about this is it helps you to understand what you need depending on whatever the training is, whatever the goals are, because you blow through a lot of glucose in ways that I don't even really understand for these like super fast sprints versus the long form endurance.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much of it that is, these are concepts that we may understand as athletes without even really knowing that we understand them. So if you run really, really fast, you're burning a whole lot of glucose, and you can't keep that up because your body can't fuel you for those short, intense efforts. We understand that conceptually as athletes. You can't just run as fast as you can forever. We also understand that if you go a little bit slower, you're also able to run a little bit faster, a little bit further, and maintain that pace for a little bit longer. That a lot of that has to do with the fuel that you have available to you, the stored glycogen that lives in your muscles and also in your liver. And your body is responding and making these chemical reactions all the time, to the point where if you keep running and don't fuel, you're going to stop at some point. You're going to run out of gas. So the ability to see this in real time that's the revolution. We know that people understand these conceptually, as I mentioned, but to be able to have a deeper level insight and understanding into what your body does and how your body responds is incredible. It's an incredible opportunity. And more so, the app that we've created is also going to give you those insights. Like, hey, Laura, why don't you try this next time? Or perhaps you can, it will give you that feedback as you go, and it will learn what is your best performance zones, because everyone is different. So long story short, it's going to be really, really cool. It is really cool. And it's just something that is another level of data. I think about myself as a triathlete, and final point on this. There's 4 disciplines to triathlon. There's swim, bike, run, and fueling and nutrition. So many people's races are ruined by getting the last one wrong.
Yes.
And a lot of it comes from over-pacing in the first 3, or not eating at the right time, or in the right amount, or the wrong type of food. Because you'll take a training plan and there will be eat 45 to 60 grams of carb per hour per whatever. And you're like, okay, cool. I'll grab this and this and this. And that works for someone else. It may work for you, but it's all just prescribed on here's what we suggest.
Right. And that doesn't work, so I row as a lightweight, which means I have to be under 129.9. I have to weigh in. If I don't make it, the whole boat doesn't go. Like you can't just swap in another rower who's 127 pounds. And I'm one of the stronger, I'm more muscular than the other women in the boat. So they're all natural lightweights. They're like 124, 125. And I train at like 136. So I have to drop, usually 8 or 9 pounds just to be safe, because I don't quite know what the scale at the regatta is going to be. So my challenge leading in, like in the 2 weeks before a race where I'm really trying to cut weight, is how do I cut as much weight as possible, water, fat, but keep as much muscle, right? So I'm protein all the time. And then right before you weigh in like 2 hours before a race. So you can't weigh in a few days ahead of time. And then, so you weigh in right before a race. And then you have 2 hours to fuel before the race. And so to have something like this that would tell me exactly what I have tells me the difference between, do I need a banana? Do I need coconut water? Do I need, like, where am I getting the, instant carbs from that I have to be able to digest really fast before the race? Like, how do I do it? So the timing of the fueling, I think, is so important. I mean, that's the thing that I think, for me at least, that's the trial and error thing, because you think, well, I had a banana before this race and it worked well, but then I had a banana before the next race and I got sick to my stomach. And there's so many other variables that are in there because I'm not looking at the one piece of data, because I can't see the glucose in my body. So it's fascinating to be able to actually get real-time information on that.
Yeah, so cool. And I think, like, for you to get glucose loaded and ready to go, to have enough energy to last those 8 minutes or less, is super important. That's the most important thing. You have enough fuel to be able to fuel that 8-minute effort, because that's too fast to sprint. So you're
I mean, this is 8 minutes at 190 heart rate. So for me as a 50-year-old, that's,
full gas. There's no guessing there.
Yeah, like there's a point about 6 minutes in where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. Is my heart going to explode? Am I going to die? Are we going to win? Like, I just keep going.
Yeah. No, it's really fascinating. There's so many applications, and it's exciting. It's kind of, as I said, like combining all of these things that I'm really passionate about and really love, and bringing something new to the world. It's really cool.
So you mentioned earlier that you have some, last question, that you have some additional athletic pursuits, goals. What's next for you?
Wow, this is breaking news. I
Yes.
never thought I would ever do another Ironman again. My last Ironman was in 2016. I'd come back from my accident. I did Ironman Texas, and then I still had this pursuit of getting back to Kona. I didn't qualify there, so I raced in Ironman Coeur d'Alene. We had just found out that we were having a baby. I was like, what the F am I doing out here? I got off the bike in like 5th or 6th place, started running, my back and my hip and everything was locking up. And I ended up taking my shoes off and sitting down on the run course. And I said, I'm done. I quit. This is it. It's been a good run. And my wife kind of came up beside me. She's like, put your effing shoes back on and finish, because I didn't come all this way to watch you and sit here with you and sulk. Like, I'm pregnant. Get your ass back out there and finish this race.
I love her.
She's amazing. So I finished. You would love her. I can't wait for you guys to meet. So I finished the race and I swore never again. I just launched the business. We were about to have our first kid. I was like, I actually took pleasure in deleting Training Peaks off my phone. I was like, this is great. I'm never going to use this app ever again. But I'm actually going to do an Ironman next year. I've decided that I'm going to get back on the horse. I'm going to start training on November 1st, give myself a year, and I'm going to go back and give Ironman another shot. I've done plenty of stuff in between. I've taken on some ultra runs. I've done a whole bunch of ultra gravel cycling events, but my heart still is in triathlon, and I'm gonna saddle up and do it again.
I love it. Well, this is it. There's nothing like a public commitment strategy, right?
There you go, right?
Keep going. So now everybody knows. All 4 people listening to this.
Yeah. My mom, your mom,
exactly.
Lauren later, and some random person.
Yeah, maybe my husband, or who knows. But that's amazing. That is really exciting. And do you have? So I got to ask, do you have like a goal of what success looks like to you, Matt? Is it winning? Is it placing? Is it just completing it? Like, at this stage in your career, at this stage in your life, at this stage with your family, with the business, has the idea of success changed? Is it still the same? How will you be satisfied when you're at that finish line?
Yeah, great question. I think I've got this theory that Ironman has ruined me. It's given me so much great stuff in my life, but it's also ruined me because, like, it feels like anything less than that is why bother. And it also,
anything less than winning.
Anything less than winning and anything less than reaching your goals is kind of like, why am I putting on my shoes for that? So I want to put myself in a position where success for me will be, I can look at myself in the mirror after the race and know that I crossed every T and dotted every I, given the circumstances of my life, business, family, all of those things. But if I can do the little things, if I can do my hip strength and my core and all of the little things,
consistency.
Consistency. If I can do all of those things and know that I gave it my best shot, and not quit, and when it gets hard and the conflicting messages are coming on your shoulder at some point in the race, at some point in the training cycle, at some point when it's dark and windy and rainy and I have to make a choice to put my shoes on and get out the door, if I can tick all of those boxes, then I'll be happy.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Travis is my neighbor here in Massachusetts. So you're starting your training on November 1, right? When it's getting dark and windy and cold and rainy and snowy. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to use the motivation of a new training program to get me through the winter. And then when the weather turns around, it'll be easy then, right?
Absolutely. I've been asking people on this podcast about their wonder hell moments, these moments when you're in the wonder, where you've realized that you're capable of more than you ever thought possible. It's incredible. It's awesome. It's humbling. It's wonderful. And also, you've never been so intimidated and overwhelmed and exhausted in your entire life. It's hell. It's wonder hell. And it sounds to me like there's going to be moments in this training where you're going to be in wonder hell, and the knowing, like, I've asked people what has helped them get through the wonder hell. And it sounds like knowing that you're bringing your best to it. So the big things and the small things is going to be what helps you get through it.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think, it's interesting. That's an interesting thought, because so much of it is uncertain. So, like, even in a training program or in a training plan, so much of it is uncertain, and you're not going to have your best day every day. And it's kind of like judging it on an end result, really, as like the way that people kind of justify their training. So I think I need to dig into that more and think about, like, what are those mini goals along the way that I can have moments of wonder hell and know that I'm well and truly on the right path. And yeah, it sucks right now because it's snowing and it's 20 degrees out, but this is what I signed up for, and this is part of the journey. So
yeah, because I don't know about you, but a goal that is I'm going to reach a year from now doesn't keep me motivated. It's just too far. It's just I failed the marshmallow test. It's like I need those mini goals. I need that, or else I got to see progress. And also, how do you know if you're actually making it there? Like if you're 1 degree off course, it doesn't matter if you're only going 10 feet, but if you're going 10 miles, that 1 degree is you're going to end up in a different state. So like you can't measure whether or not you're even on the right trajectory if you're heading to your target, if you don't have those mini goals. So mini goals.
Mini goals. I think it's different this time because I've been through it. I know, I've done 9 Ironmans. I kind of know where I need to be at certain times and certain, duration before an event, and, there'll be mini events in there. So I think I've got enough experience to know that I'll be on the right path. I think the complexity is I've never done this with a family. I've never done this with 2 kids at home and a wife who still has ambitions in career, but also is wanting to qualify for the US Olympic trials as a marathoner. Like she's got big, ambitious goals as a runner. So like we've never done this together as a family unit. So some of that complexity of like we might be off course here is probably actually related to the balance of everything else that's happening in life. I think the physicality and the mentality of getting ready for a race, I think I know where I need to be headed for that. It's the rest.
Yeah. The rest is outside of your control. Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, how do you do the training and then she do the training and also raise your babies, which will clearly be super athletes? I mean, that's some good DNA you got there, Trav.
Yeah. I'm hoping so. They're good kids. My daughter will definitely be a performer, but I think honestly, it's building the plane as we fly. Same thing. You can't like. I never ever want to be a person that's like, what if? Like, what if we? What about all the things?
I wish I would have.
And or like, this is going to be really hard. And like, there's going to be times where like, you won't be able to run. The kids will be sick and we don't have breakfast and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to like even give energy to those thoughts right now. It's like, let's just deal with it when it comes. Yeah. And if we don't have big, ambitious goals, then we're not living a big, full, ambitious life. And I would rather face those complexities together and deal with the shit when it comes than not even begin because it seems really difficult.
That's right. That's right. I think if your goals don't scare the shit out of you, you probably made them too small.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for people who are watching this, they can see the banner scrolling below, but for anyone else who's now listening to this on the podcast, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, I love a good little Instagram feed. At Trav McKenzie is my Instagram. You can find me there most often. I'm reintroducing for a short period of time the joke of the day with my 3.5-year-old daughter. So we're going to bring that back. We've had some demand for that. So we're going to bring that back. We're starting with the Halloween jokes. So you can find me there. That's the best place to reach me. I really love that about social media is the ability to connect with people from all over the place and share stories and get a window and a snapshot into people's lives. So I'm all for social media. I know some people aren't, but I'm all for it. So find me there. Go check out supersapiens.com if you want to know more about our new product that we're launching. Super fun, super exciting. And then that's it, I guess. I'm actually really so glad we got to have this conversation. You're a star, and I love every conversation we ever have, and to have it in a public space with 4 people watching like this has been a lot of fun, and I hope to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for just being part of this and jumping in when I asked.
Of course, anytime.
I'm excited to follow your training.
Yeah, thank you. You too. And I'll, let's stay in touch. Let's chat soon.